Hey guys, Shada-san here. Welcome back to my channel. So this is the second installment in my series on blindness and my personal practice. So today I want to get into three main points, and the first one being adaptation. I think right now we're all adapting to this whole situation, from social distancing practices to wearing masks to interacting with each other, using online tools. The adaptations in my practice personally can vary. Mainly it has to do with what I use to, keep notes. So like a note-taking device, or my computer, or using a screen reader to read blogs or write blogs, or using a note-taking device to read books. And books are another adaptation. Books can be one of the biggest adaptations because some books are hard to come by, like especially some of the older books. I've studied the history of like different paths, and when I was looking into, especially like with Wicca, I've seen some books, but some of the older books I can find easily, and other books I find more difficult, like the ones that are out of print. And I could imagine that if you're doing a path that's reconstructionist or based off a lot of lore, finding that lore might be a little harder. Sacred text has been helpful, but it can only go so far. I've adapted to that in terms of where I get my books from, such as mainstream sources like books on the iPhone, Kindle, things like that, but I'm not likely to. My hair is in my face. Sorry. I'm less likely to get them from any specific source. I'll get them from a variety of sources. In addition to that, adapting to where I put things. So, for example, with this jar here, hold on, it's tilted. I'm using my other hand to find the camera a little better because it's not always easy for me to see. This jar has all kinds of crystals in it, and I keep these specific set of crystals in it for a specific purpose, and I use only those crystals when I'm using very specific spells or a particular spell in question, which leads me to my next point, which is, identification and identifying things. Crystals and herbs and plants are probably the most difficult to identify, being blind, just because I don't have enough vision to see the details on some crystals, the details on some plants. So I can only go by texture, shape, smell, energetic connection to the crystal or plant. So with crystals, I usually go by the texture, whether it's raw, tumbled, or not, the energy, the shape, the weight, the size. That all plays a part in how you identify things. Even if you just picked up a random stone in your backyard and you picked it up and you felt the texture and weight, you picked up another one, they're going to feel different tactily and energetically. In addition to that, identifying herbs is hard because I can't just look around and see what herbs are for what plant. And when I see images are another one. So images are a little difficult because I need to take whatever concept. So the concept that I think of the most is sigils. So I don't know how to do like traditional sigils. I'm still learning about that. So with sigils, I'm learning how to figure out to take the basic concept of creating sigils and creating them in a way that's going to make sense. Whether that's me creating a tactile version using some kind of raised line drawing board to make it more tactile with a piece of paper and a pen, or making my own images with something else. In addition to that, with sigils, learning what sigils actually look like, and that might be a little more creative, whether using somebody, having a friend or someone tell me what they look like, or drawing it out somehow. With symbols, especially like modern symbols or common symbols that you would see, like I was learning about the vanishing pentagram at one point, and I found that to be difficult to create. I had to use one of my own necklaces that I have, and I would get it right now, but it's currently in a pile of other stuff. And I grabbed that and used that as sort of a reference guide and based it off the concept that I knew about with a description. So those are kind of another way that I've done, identification of things. It's definitely a challenge, but it's doable. There's always a workaround, which also leads me to my last point, which is about modification. So modification is one of those things. I'm always accommodating something, modifying something to help me understand things as a blind or visually impaired person. And that might look like something else, whether that's me modifying how, like I said, I read books, to how I learn a specific concept. I know for other people who might be blind or visually impaired, especially if you have like less vision than I do, one of the concepts would be visualization. They talk about it so greatly in books, and they talk about visualizing a light. Well, if you've never seen light, you have to identify and modify that, because that requires you to understand what light is, not just scientifically, but like from a visual component. And if you do not know, I always tell people, regardless of vision, whether they're sighted or not, I tell people, use all your senses. It's like imagining your favorite vacation spot and putting yourself in that space. What would your favorite vacation spot feel like, smell like? What would you hear? What would you, taste, smell, whatever? And that's one way of modifying other things. Another way of modifying something could look like making things more tactile. So I didn't talk about this in the accompanying blog post, but I was thinking about this as I started thinking about it yesterday and filming. Making things more tactile being like when you're casting a spell or you're doing something specific to your practice, making like a representation of the elements or making a representation of something for your spell might be a more creative endeavor by drawing it out or making it tactile using some kind of craft or something of that nature. But that's just something that I just thought about right now. These things could be expanded on and, extended further. Also, creating, your own magical texts. That could be a challenge for some people with modification, because there's only so much you could do if you don't have access to technology or access to certain things, because not everybody has access to certain things. So that might be some kind of modification, whether you recorded it somehow on a recording device, or you wrote it out in hard copy braille, or you wrote it out by hand if you have some vision. It just depends, but for me, I can't handwrite very well, so I choose to do a little bit of electronic stuff for most things, but I also do it in hard copy. I don't have my hard copy book right now because I want to save that for a whole nother video. But like I said, this could be expanded on further for many things. But I hope that this has been helpful to you, and if you have any questions or comments, please let me know, and I'll be happy to answer them. So hope all are well, stay safe, and talk to you all soon. Many blessings.